The boldness of the unintelligent is really something to behold. I've gotten this comment so many times from Zionists. Oh, there's no such thing as Palestine. There's no such thing as a Palestinian. Truly, I've asked this before. I want to know, do you guys have one brain cell and you collectively share it so you only get access to it like one day a year? Well, today was not your day now, was it? So I'm about to prove you wrong, but because you will just dismiss what I have to say because you think I get my education on TikTok. What did I say about Zionists? Everything they say is a projection of themselves, so apparently you get your education on TikTok. I happen to believe in reading books and studying a subject and talking to experts. So I'm going to go ahead and let an expert do the talking here. The voice you're about to hear is Shaul Magid. He's a distinguished fellow in Jewish studies at Dartmouth University, so you know, an expert. He also happens to be a colleague of my brother. He was recently a guest on the Diggs podcast talking about Zionism versus anti-Zionism. I encourage everyone to go listen to this entire episode, but for now, a relevant excerpt.
In that whole kind of project that's become, in a certain sense, Israeliness, whereas Achad Ha'am was. Now, in terms of the binationalists, I mean, you're right. Brit Shalom was a very, very small group of people, mostly German Jews. Interestingly, many of the Jews from Germany and Czechoslovakia, Prague in particular, who were part of Brit Shalom, had experienced the hyper-nationalism of the First World War and were extremely worried about this ethno-national project because they had seen firsthand what ethno-nationalism could produce. And this is particularly people like Martin Buber, Ernst Akiva Simon, and others. But I think that it never really got off the ground because I don't think that a lot of the Zionists in Palestine at that time really took the Arab question seriously. And I think in a certain sense, many of them made the miscalculation that Ben-Gurion made. Ben-Gurion's miscalculation was eventually the Arabs will mostly leave. Because why would they want to live in a Jewish country? There are all these other Arab countries that they could live in. So that didn't happen. And I think that was a big miscalculation on his part. But again, the miscalculation of Ben-Gurion, if I can repeat it, that the Arabs would leave because why don't they live in why would they want to live in a Jewish country? They can live in all these other Arab countries. That is a total colonialist perspective because the Arabs in Algeria and the Arabs in Iraq don't have anything to do with each other. It's this kind of idea that there's just the Arab world. There is no Arab world, right? There are different countries. There's not like one thing. But that was a very colonialist mentality, and I don't blame Ben-Gurion for that because that's the way I think people thought. Certainly Europeans thought. So the idea that somehow these people who were living in Palestine for generations would just very easily get up and move to Iraq, when they had no relatives in Iraq, they had no connection to Iraq, all they had was a language and they spoke a different dialect. It was a miscalculation that I think Israel is still living in the aftermath of.
And frankly, that you hear defenders of Israel, Jewish and non-Jewish in the United States, make today, that Palestinian Arabs and Arabs anywhere are interchangeable. Who are Palestinians anyways? Didn't they just invent their national identity? Well, didn't all of us just invent our national identities?
It's a convenient way for Zionists to make sense of there's only one Jewish country, there are 36 Arab countries, that kind of thing. But it really, whenever I hear that or whenever I see that on social media, it's always like, there is no Arab world. That's a manufactured fantasy that you've created to justify the fact that it doesn't make a difference if these people who have been living in Nablus for 10 generations, if they move to Amman. Like, what's the difference? Well, there is a difference. I mean, people, are rooted in places where they live. And Rashid Khalidi, who was the Edward Said Professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Columbia, wrote a really interesting book, an important book called The Palestinian Identity, where he shows from Jerusalem archives that, there was a national identity among people that lived in Palestine from about the same time Zionism began. And you can see that in the media, you can see that in language, you can see that in food, you can see that in culture, this idea that there's no such thing as a Palestinian, which was basically the position of Israel until the 1970s. It wasn't really until the 1970s that the country acknowledge that there is such a thing as the Palestinian people.
What was that again you said? The smugness from people who literally have zero knowledge of history? Once again, the ultimate in projection, huh? All of your comments are reflective of receiving a Zionist Israeli education. Israel teaches a perverse version of history that paints Israel as the victim in every scenario. I mean, your comments gave it away, didn't they? You said it yourself that no one recognized Palestine until the 1970s. No, bitch. Everyone recognized Palestine except for Israel. It's almost like if you pretend that Palestine never existed, then you never have to justify the slaughter and expulsion of hundreds of thousands of people. You see the problem with people who lie? You always get caught.